So welcome everyone. I'm working in Webstep. I've been working in Webstep for quite some time, coming from the technology side, but at the moment I'm working very much with the intersection between technology and business, helping customers get going with cloud computing, with strategy in the cloud, and so on. And that's also the reason behind the title today, because I get a lot of questions about, but what about vendor lock-in? Isn't that expensive, or will it be complicated, or should we think about that, and how should we handle that? So on Software 2020 conference, just before COVID, I had a longer session on cloud strategy where vendor lock-in was a part of that. So, so part of this content is based on that talk as well. I'm unsure if the Software 2020, the full talk is online at all. But here goes with vendor lock-in for a short time. If you have questions, just type them in the chat or raise your hand, and I will answer them when I'm through with the presentation. And also, if you'd like to talk and discuss the questions after the presentation, the Q&A will not be recorded, so feel free to do that. So vendor lock-in, what is it really? When we're talking about lock-in, are we talking about committing to a vendor? It's like I will choose Oracle over Sybase, or are we talking to committing to a technology? So okay, I will go to electric vehicle instead of regular fossil fuel vehicles. Or are we committing to a long-term contract? So kind of if you're going with the product you're purchasing, are you kind of committing to stick to that for 5 or 7 or 10 years? Or is it hard to getting out of an agreement? So you're not committing to any length, but we've seen contracts that are kind of, when you want to get out of it, it's a hassle and it takes time because you have quite long notice times. So when you're starting asking yourself about vendor lock-in, then just think, what are you really afraid of? What are you afraid of locking into? And also, what implication can it have? So are we talking about technical constraints here? Are we talking about economical constraints, environmental constraints, might be advantages, and so on? So there's a lot of things to think about in this area. And of course, we need to think of what are the benefits of the product or the benefits from the vendor. Is it far better quality? So we are kind of deciding going for this super duper lawnmower because the quality from the supplier is good? Or is it a financial incentive here? Is it expensive or cheap to go to a specific vendor? Is the vendor up to date? Are they kind of getting new technology out there? Are they inventing? It's also time to market, both for you as a customer. So are you getting the latest, greatest technology? If you're buying a car, is it is it up to date, and is it a really new technology in the car, or is it based on old technology? And also, if you are buying something, building something, especially since I'm in IT, we're looking at getting technology we can build upon, which makes time to market shorter and delivering value to the business and to the users. And of course, integration with other things. Can you integrate the things from this vendor with other vendors? For example, if you're purchasing an electric chainsaw, you might have to buy special batteries and you might have to buy special chargers. But if you're purchasing an electric vehicle, that's kind of integrated with charging stations all over, so you don't have to think about that. So you're getting, for an electric vehicle, you're kind of getting a lock into the technology, but not to not to this specific vendor. So that's kind of things to think about. Then I'm using the cloud as a use case here because that's where I'm getting all the questions. So when we're looking at choosing, for example, the cloud vendor, or should we not choose a particular vendor, but should we try to be agnostic and not do any lock-ins? The benefit of the cloud is no long-term commitment, pay as you go. So obviously, you don't have to think about that when you're choosing the cloud, but what are your options? Are you committing to long term? So for the commitments here, you can basically bail out immediately if you've chosen a vendor. Are the vendors running state-of-the-art technology all the time? The cloud vendors are normally doing that. If you're running things, yourself, are you able to keep up? Or if you're going to a local vendor, do they have state-of-the-art technology? So Amazon, Google, and others are far better than you in building, operating, and running systems. So quality is superb there, far better than anyone else. So that should be one of the benefits going to the cloud. And the cloud is not just a hosting facility. So think about that as well, because it helps you with time to market and it helps you with other things compared to running on-prem. So kind of there are some advantages here we should consider when we're diving into a cloud vendor. So I have a short case just illustrating how this affects, how this actually affects the economies here on lock-in or not lock-in. It's based on a real case, but the kind of details are hidden and the numbers are kind of distorted. So we're having an application. Let's say we're having an application where you're going to store documents, images, or videos. So someone is going to upload documents, images, and videos to a system, and they need to download the content as well, and they want to browse and search the content perhaps. So it's a very, very simple system. When we're building this application, we can then check, do we want to be vendor agnostic? So do we want to build this system so we can run it everywhere? Or do we want to be cloud native and build it on the actual services for that particular cloud vendor? So for you tech guys, if you're building it vendor agnostic, you have to put in some different things here in the application stack, and you also have to operate and maintain those pieces. If we're going cloud native here with, for example, Amazon Web Services, we have to write some business logic here and do some configuration, but all the operations are on the vendor and they're taking care of everything. So what should we look at here? First of all, how much does it cost to build these systems? And the development cost here, D, is far greater if you're trying to build your system vendor agnostic compared to a native solution. So it will cost you more to build a vendor agnostic solution in a good and secure way. And also that would mean that it takes longer time to get that solution to the market than building it natively in the cloud. So development cost is far higher and time to market is far higher. So that's one aspect of it. So here you're actually spending more money and time on building it vendor agnostic and not locking into the vendor. Next thing is operation. So how much does it cost to operate this system if you're building it yourself versus if you're using it natively? So in this case, it's the operational cost is far greater if you're trying to operate yourself, even if it's running in the cloud, but you've built the vendor agnostic solution so you can take it out from cloud vendor and put it into another or run it yourself. So solution A here is far more expensive than solution B. And that's basically because you need to make sure everything is running and taking care of that. You need to patch it. You're responsible for security. You're responsible for scaling if if you're getting a lot of traffic. You're responsible for making sure you have enough storage. You're responsible for backups and so on. So not a normal, it could be kind of a factor of 6. So if you're running in the cloud natively, it will cost you 5 something. And if you're running vendor agnostic, it will cost you 30 something per month. So that's a factor of 6 on the operational side. So if you're looking at these numbers, when we're seeing whether we should build vendor agnostic or not, if this system is going to run for 3 years, it will cost you 900 extra to run a vendor agnostic system than running a native built system. So that's kind of a huge difference, and that's probably money you could spend on something else, or it's money straight earned in here. And also we talked about time to market and development cost. If you're looking at a 3-year cycle here for that system, probably after 3 years you would anyway need to do something with the system in the meantime, or if you're switching after 3 years, you might build a new system due to new technology. So if you started out native, you would have saved 900, which you can use on other things after 3 years and come out with the same outcome as if you were running vendor agnostic all the time. Then again, if we decide to switch, how much will it cost to rebuild or build this system and also switch from the native solution to the vendor agnostic solution? So if we for some reason decide, no, we don't want to run it in AWS anymore, we want to move it to another cloud vendor, or we want to run it on-prem, then let's say the switching cost is 120. So if you're just looking at the operation cost and at the switching cost and those numbers, that means that within 4.8 months, we are starting to earn money on the native solution. So if you're switching after 5 months, it's cheaper to run native in the cloud solution than running vendor agnostic. So have that in mind when you're doing this. Over 3 years, you have 780 saved, even though you're switching at the end. So have this in mind when you're committing to a vendor or don't want to commit to a vendor and so on. Is it really worth it, and is it worth all the hassle, using more time on building stuff and more time on operating stuff? There is also one thing in this case, because IT is kind of labor intensive if you're doing things wrong, and that is, do you have the resources to go vendor agnostic? Because you will spend more time on developing and you will spend more time on operations, and that is also a factor in here. Do you have the people to do that? So that was just an example. So when it comes to vendor lock-in, instead of asking, hey, is it dangerous? Isn't this vendor lock-in if I'm going with this solution or that solution? Let's turn it around. And if you're starting asking this question, my question back to you, have you really made up your mind? If you're saying you're going for the cloud, not on running on-prem, if you're saying you're going for Amazon and not for Google Cloud or IBM Cloud, for example, have you really made up your mind, or do you need to think more about it? So make up your mind up front, because if you think you're going to change your mind within a year, you have obviously not thought it through well enough. And how long are you going to stay? If you're saying that we will move this system into this vendor, or we will purchase this product, how long are you going to live with that? That's also a factor here, so think about that. What are the benefits? So focus on the benefits of the solution, product, or vendor. Don't focus on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So try to see what are the advantages, what are the benefits, and focus on business, your business, and building business value. So what could you actually do if you were not spending time on avoiding lock-in? There's a lot of things you actually could do there, as we also saw in the example. So instead of focusing on vendor lock-in, I think we're actually talking about exit cost. So if you're going to exit someday, what are the implications and how much will that be? So then you're focusing on the long term in case you're going to exit. But when you're building or committing, you're focusing today and also delivering things. So instead, what will the switching cost look like? Is it expensive? Is it inexpensive to switch? What's the likelihood of a switch occurring? For a lot of people, it's very little probability that you're actually going to switch. So if you're trying to build everything so you have a low switching cost and you're not switching, it will probably be very expensive in the long run. And how can you actually reduce those risks in a cost-efficient manner? So especially from a cloud perspective, the advantage there is, of course, you're committing short-term when it comes to contracts and such things. You can be flexible and you can adapt to things that are available to you. In the cloud, you experiment often, you fail fast and you fail cheap. And as mentioned, focus on time to market, focus on business value and things like that is instead of focusing on all the hard parts. And of course, be smart. So vendor lock-in is, in my view, exit cost or switching cost. It might come or it might not come. My example is typically that another thing where you should think about smartness is travel insurance. Normally, you're not buying yourself a travel insurance when you're a kid, just in case you're going traveling sometime in the future. It's very expensive to keep paying on that travel insurance all the time through all the years. You get it when you need it. So being vendor agnostic can actually cost you a lot. So don't outsmart yourself with focusing on all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt here, but focus on the positive things and of course, building business value and time to market and get the business running. So that was kind of very few bits and bobs around things I normally discuss with customers when they're diving into oh, I'm afraid about vendor lock-in if I'm choosing this technology, maybe we should choose something else. There is, my example wasn't that huge, but I've seen other decisions out there, which is really, really costly, basically because one tries to stay vendor agnostic on the technology side or on the vendor or product side. So that's it for me.